Hello, I'm Mayor Van Keuren. I'm speaking to residents today about the process and the deliberations that led the council and me to decide to commit borough money, your money, my money, for the installation of an artificial turf field at the Faber Recreation area on Doremus Avenue. To begin, the deteriorating condition of that area has been a matter of concern for some time. I think many people are aware of that. The concern was initially raised several years ago in the form of a plan to rest fields. It never happened because of the demand for field usage. Then, year after year, residents came to the council, mostly those affiliated in some way with youth recreation. And then came the Game On Glen Rock group. And more recently, it's been a concern discussed by the council and our borough engineer. There have been public discussions about the condition of Faber Field and what to do about it for over a year, with some considering renovation proposals a want and some considering them a need. Until a few months ago, though, we as a community hadn't been able to decide on what to do. Some said, do nothing. Don't spend the money. It was good enough for kids in the past, and it should be good enough for kids today. Some said, throw on some dirt and some seed and water it. Some said, put down natural sod. Some said, the only dependable long-term solution is artificial turf. And some said, share the fields at the high school with the school system. As the council and I began construction of the annual municipal budget earlier this year, this topic kept entering the conversation. We considered a number of Band-Aid approaches, but nothing seemed to be a true and lasting solution. We thought about what we heard from a number of sources: the sports organizations, the borough engineers, and many residents. We considered what nearby towns have done and are continuing to do, and why each chose its approach: Wyckoff, Franklin Lakes, Ridgewood, Mahwah. We gathered information about what the costs of the various options might be, and we considered the consequences of doing each of the options mentioned above. Doing nothing, difficult in the face of growing safety and health dangers. Dirt and seed, already tried at that location, a disaster. Natural sod. The cost of sod, the cost of irrigation, and the fact you can't play on it for a year were a concern. Artificial turf, not much more expensive than natural turf, immediately playable, an environmental upgrade. The high school fields. Possible sharing brings scheduling challenges. We were concerned that Band-Aid solutions, made year by year and stretching over the next several years, might, on one hand, have a more moderate impact on the budget, but might, on the other hand, be pouring money down the drain and not really dealing with the growing concerns about safety. Our concern was that these solutions would not address, in a substantial way, the deterioration of the field. And we felt a responsibility to look not only at things that matter to the current community, but that matter to the future community as well. But of course, we had to consider the impact on our budget of whatever we decided to do, whether it was do nothing or do something. Very briefly, we examined the cost of installing and maintaining natural sod, the cost of installing and maintaining artificial turf, the cost of installing a fresh topsoil overlay and then grading, seeding, and maintaining that covering, and the cost or consequences of doing nothing. The choice of artificial turf was reached after satisfying ourselves of 4 steps or concerns. First, we evaluated the options one by one from a usage perspective, and that includes natural grass and sod, and sharing the high school fields, both with and without lighting at those fields. Natural grass or sod have been shown to be not capable of withstanding the degree of usage that our recreation programs give it at that location, but would require substantial maintenance. The fields at the high school are needed by the school at the times that the recreation programs need them, and no rescheduling would free up the fields for us sufficiently. So B, we became convinced that the proposed artificial surface would provide an environmental improvement over the current conditions for two reasons. First, unlike the current situation in which all rain runs directly and immediately into Diamond Brook, the proposed installation will allow us to capture the rain directly, to have it seep directly and quickly into a deep gravel bed underlying the artificial surface, where it will be captured, retained, and ultimately channeled into piping that will lead into existing stormwater sewers. And second, no trees will be removed, and as a matter of fact, some trees will be added. Also, we were assured that there are no toxic chemicals in the artificial surface and that there will be minimal buildup of heat at the surface of the field. And also, we were concerned about lighting. We've been assured that the lighting that will be installed will be both minimally intrusive and be closely managed as to time. So, having made a tentative choice and having a solid estimate of the cost of the artificial turf field, we examined the annual cost of the 10-year bond that would be needed to pay for the field and what it would do to property taxes. Part of that examination was to involve the sports groups. Knowing that we would raise the money for the field with a 10-year bond, we asked each group for a 10-year commitment to contribute a portion of the borough's annual cost to pay off the bond. Each group responded affirmatively and immediately. The aggregate annual contribution from the groups each year for 10 years is $50,000 in total. Formal commitment, signed contract. And while we debated, we received letters and emails that said, among other things, what about senior housing? What about streets and roads? What about services for seniors? What about incentives for landlords in the central business district? What about trees? We're aware of those concerns. Several are already provided for in our 2014 municipal budget. Some may prove to have the intended benefits offset by some unexpected and unpalatable financial consequences. One or two have been and continue to be discussed in our public work sessions. I have no doubt that this council will give active attention to them. And are there other things that the council and I are actively discussing? You bet there are. To name a few, senior housing, the Arboretum, and the borough's trees. It'll all be done at our work sessions and public meetings. And lastly, it has occurred to me that there's something else we can do, perhaps should do, to make residents more aware of our discussions. So, starting with the next public meeting, I will present at each meeting a short description of the things we discussed at our most recent work session. To conclude, what I've just presented is a brief overview of the sequence of deliberations that led us to introduce and ultimately approve an ordinance to raise money to pay for an artificial surface at the Faber recreation fields. And with that, thanks for listening.